Hello, and welcome to Information Requested, a podcast about progressive fantasy and more. I'm your host, Remixt, alongside co-host Bamfious, and today we are joined by a very special guest, a successful game developer turned narrator extraordinaire. He's given voice to our favorite characters in Will White's Cradle series, among countless others. Some of his most recent work you can find on Audible is Shadeslinger, Divine Aposty, and Ravenous. I'm actually currently listening to Ravenous, and it's quite good so far. I'm about 9 hours in. And
didn't you recommend Shadeslinger to me like 2 weeks ago?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's awesome.
Okay.
It really is. It really is good. And finally, if you want to find out more about Travis or just follow him on various social media, links to his Twitter, Discord, and other links will be in the description below. Thanks so much for coming.
You will be able to find him
Thanks
in
for
the
having
description below.
Right. Anyway, thank you so much for coming.
Thank
you so much for coming, Travis. We are super excited to have you here, and we have a million questions for you. But the first one is something that a lot of people, I'm sure, are curious about, is how did you go from game development to recording audiobooks, and maybe even go one step further back? How did you get into game development in the first place? Let's just get the whole story.
You might have told the story before, but I want to set that stage so we can segue into other questions about like the specifics.
Sure. So if you want to go all the way back, I started in like actual game development probably in the late 90s. I mean, prior to that, I did lots of hobby stuff. I enjoyed it. I played games. I played games since I was a kid. I had a Commodore 64. I still got some sitting out there. You know, Atari, all the old stuff, really old stuff. Makes me feel old. And I did a lot of hobbyist development. Eventually, I worked for a company called Wild Tangent that made web 3D stuff and used games as kind of a way to prove out their technology. And the first thing I did that anybody actually cared about was a game called Fate, which was a very Diablo top-down isometric action RPG, which a lot of people have played on their parents' Dells and HPs or whatever as, you know, like a demo that was packed in. After that, I ended up working with the actual folks from Blizzard North, from Diablo. They had started Flagship Studios, and I basically started a satellite studio working with them to do a smaller game to kind of prove out the Hellgate London's technology, which was called Mythos. Lots of drama to do with Hellgate. That company died, and basically we bought all of our office equipment at liquidation and started Runic Games, where we made the Torchlight series. After doing that for 7 or 8 years, I just got tired of the huge business of like 30 people and having meetings, and left with my partner Eric Schaefer to make a company called Double Damage, where we made the Rebel Galaxy series. And along in there, I started narrating on the side. I was doing a lot of the audio work for the Rebel Galaxy series, and I didn't want to go to a studio.
Yeah.
So I got a sound booth so I could have people come in and sit down and do it. And I tended to do a lot of the voice work for it too, just, you know, game VO. And so I kind of put together the equipment to do audiobook recording sort of accidentally. But at the same time, I came across ACX, which is, I don't know if you're not familiar with ACX, it's a sort of a service that Audible/Amazon run that allows independent authors to pair up with independent narrators to produce audiobooks that go out on Audible and iTunes and whatever. So they'll put up a book for audition. You can audition for it. You mutually agree to the terms. You do the work, and it gets published. So it's a way to do it that isn't through a bigger publisher. And I started doing work through that, and I found out that I really, really liked it. I used to read to my kids all the time. I read to my wife. None of them need me to read to them anymore. I liked doing it. I really liked audiobooks. Frank Muller is probably my favorite audiobook narrator of all time. He used to do all of Stephen King's stuff. The Green Mile, still my favorite audiobook, probably. Anyway, he's fabulous. And I loved how dynamic that was. It wasn't like somebody just reading to you. He did voices and he put the emotion into it, and there was it was just very gripping audio narration with no other bells or whistles, and I thought it was amazing. And so I had that in mind for audiobook work, and that's what I kind of aspired to. And I ended up doing more and more books. And eventually along came Will's book on ACX, which is where I saw it through that service. And I ended up doing it. And I had never heard of Cradle before. Weirdly, I had just barely heard of game lit or lit RPG or progression fantasy at all, even though I've made RPGs. I just initially was not aware of it as a genre because it's relatively new overall.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And Cradle was kind of my entry into all of that. Progression fantasy first, which led to things like The Thousand Li and lots of other progression fantasy stuff. But also then started doing more game lit and lit RPG, and they all there's a lot of overlap.
Right. I like to call them adjacent.
Yeah, they're
very
they're genre adjacent.
Yeah.
And Cradle's been better for me, I'm sure, than it's been for Will. Will would be just fine without me, but Cradle's done a whole lot for me as far as just being able to work with something that's so good, that so many people like, and that's so much fun to do. It's a rare opportunity to get to do that, and I'm really fortunate and lucky that it worked out that way.
Well, you crushed it. Absolutely crushed it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's gone both ways. Definitely, I think the whole Cradle audiobook audience as a whole are really happy that you ended up, it sounds like by happenstance, to become the narrator for the series. There's a lot of, I don't want to say bad, but worse narrators out there that could have gotten the series, and I feel like maybe it wouldn't have grown as much if it weren't for the popularity of the series on Audible on top of Kindle. So it's really awesome.
Yeah, and I have a quick question about you having done this many Cradle books thus far, and having had a previous career where people knew who you were because you were the game designer of their favorite game. Has the tide shifted now to the point where people who see your name or talk about you on Reddit or whatever, has it shifted to the point where they're now mostly talking about your audiobook work? Or do you still get most of your internet traffic from the game designer side?
I don't think it took very long, if you do any books at all, before people know you more for that than they do for game work. Game work is, to a certain extent, it's kind of opaque. We're not like in the era of Will White, or not Will Wright. There's too many Wills. Will Wright. We're not in the era of Will Wright.
Pretty
Will
close.
White. We're in the era of Will White, but not Will Wright. Peter Molyneux and people like that. I think games are mostly its companies at this point, and that's what people recognize, if they recognize anything at all. So I don't think gaming personalities penetrate too much to the world at large, except in some rare circumstances.
Yeah, very rarely.
Notch or whatever. It's not. It's just, if there's just a lot more of a wall between you, and to a certain extent, as a game developer, you want that wall because the gaming public at large is volatile. Let's say.
I was going to say it's.
Would you say they're more or less volatile than fans of progression fantasy?
Oh my God, they're not even the same universe. People in books are nice.
Interesting.
I think once you get to the point where you're willing to sit down and listen to or read a book, there's just a certain level of patience that you have cultivated as a human being. I don't know. My observation is that not only are the people who write books and narrate books, honestly, generally really nice people. It's a really friendly and enjoyable industry to be in. But the kind of people who listen to them and interact with you are also generally nice. I mean, you can always get a butt. I mean, you can, but if you make a game someone doesn't like, they will track you across message boards and the internet to burn you to the ground in any way they can. If somebody doesn't like the book you did, they leave a 1-star review and maybe they call you a dirty name or they say you suck, but that's generally the end of it. And I think a lot of, coming from games, I have a certain amount of asbestos built up. So coming into books, it's just like, wow, this is nothing. This is just so pleasant.
I was going to say,
if you called me a jerk, I'm like, oh, look at you.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost polarizing. You have the complete opposite end of the spectrum on the gaming side, just because if somebody doesn't like your game, like Travis said, they'll go after your whole family for some reason. But there's just like
really strange,
a really toxic environment, I feel like, in the
there's an expectation of completion to things, right? When people get a book, you're not like, well, I can't wait till version 2 comes out. Are you going to patch this? What's the
That's
DLC?
true.
There's no, it's not a living, you know, people do corrections, but it's not like it's a living product, and there's no expectation of you extending yourself beyond the thing that you did. It is what it is. A game is a very different prospect, especially now where everything is so live and so updated. I mean, try to update your audiobook. You have to delete it. You can't tell if there's a new version. It's not like that sort of dynamism to the relationship just doesn't exist. Same thing for books. It's just not straightforward.
Wouldn't that be interesting though, if you could patch a book? I feel like there's so many parallel dynamics to programming and writing, and that is one of the things that isn't similar, is that you don't have patches or updates. Once you have a book, it's the same for 30 years.
It is weird that you can't tell if there's a new version of an audiobook and choose to get it. Because it's not like they don't update the audio. It's not like you can't, I just love to make sure I've got the latest version. Any other application or software or movie or whatever, it's like you can get the latest version. Audiobooks, you don't know.
Yeah.
There's also like a wall between you and people who consume it. It's like you can't respond back to the Audible reviews, thankfully. Because God knows how many authors and narrators would step in it by doing that. But
oh no.
For sure. It is kind of a weird ecosystem that Audible and by extension Amazon have built around that, like the audiobook, ecosystem.
It's a little bit weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff Bezos built the Kindle based off of the idea from A Young Lady's Illustrated Primer, A Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson, which is like this book that teaches this girl martial arts, how to code, all this cool stuff. It's interactive and it updates itself. And then to see how Kindle and audiobooks are still sort of separate. WhisperSync makes them less so, but still, like there's not that cool interaction. Like one of the questions someone asked me to ask you involved enhanced media in audio, like with music in the background or like right. And so I am interested if you see that being the future of audio, or if it's like if it has a certain place.
I think it probably has a place. I think some people really like it and some people don't. I think it's kind of like radio play territory in a lot of ways. And you can have a wide variety of like production polish on that, right? I mean, the sound booth theater, that's kind of their jam. Right. And they do a great job of it. And they have an audience that loves it and wants that. I believe they kind of split a lot of those productions now. I think like that's more of a recent development where they have both versions. They'll have like a straightforward read version, and there may be multiple actors, duet or dual style. And then they have kind of the fully enhanced version, and they're effectively separating them as products because I'm assuming they recognize that there's people who want one or the other. Right. I'm personally a purist. I like to do it knowing that if I had to do it somewhere else, if somebody put me behind a mic in front of a crowd of people, I could do what I needed to do without any help or without being, I'm sorry, I can't do this voice right now because I have to have a flange for this to work. So I like, for me, it's just part of it, the fun. I like it. I enjoy, how far can you push it with what you've got I think that's part of the joy of it. But I understand why people like that full production experience too. I mean, you look at the stuff they do with Star Wars, and they have this amazing library of audio that they can use. And you've got John Williams music and lightsaber sounds, and you've got Mark Thompson doing freaking great voices. They can do some really cool stuff. So I don't discount its value, but I think they're always going to be both.
Yeah. After you started talking about that, I completely agree. Whenever Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book is the one book that I can think of that has both. It has Neil Gaiman's version where he's talking, and then there's like a whole cast of actors for the different version.
They do that also for all of Sanderson's stuff. There's the graphic audio versions of like the Stormlight Archive. So you can get the Michael Kramer Kate Reading version, which is a dual style. And then you can go get the graphic audio, full production, crazy, war battle sounds and a full cast kind of vibe too. So you got kind of both versions you can do there as well. And those are long.
Yeah, that's like 60 hours, I think, is the most recent one. It was crazy.
That's a lot of audio.
Right. Well, okay. So I'm going to segue this a little bit, and then Clayton, I'm going to hand it over to you. But this is something I wanted to bring up. Travis, you and I had a discussion in Will's Discord once about the speed with which someone should listen to an audiobook, specifically one where the narrator does a specific job with cadence, and you converted me. And so I think it's interesting how, even though when you're just using your voice and not this expanded production, you're still able to create an immersive experience with the tools that you use. But I do want to hear more of your opinion on why readers should listen to these audiobooks at normal speed.
I mean, my preference is always it'd be at 1x, because in general, the narrator is trying to target a specific kind of effect with their voice. There's a tempo to what you say, there's musicality to it, pauses are chosen for a reason, for a dramatic effect. I mean, everything is done intentionally. So for the same reason that you could, if you speed up music, it loses its emotional impact. If you play a sad song at double speed, it sounds ridiculous. It's funny. It's not sad. I think that you bleed out some of what the narrator intended. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to listen to it at whatever speed you want to, whatever works for you. And some people can only consume audio at a certain rate and have it be comprehensible. So sometimes the pace might be too much, because it's not like you can go back and reread. I mean, you have to scroll back, and that's annoying. So I don't begrudge people if they have to do that. But if you're just doing it to get the story faster, I think you're losing some of the point of audio.
Absolutely. You converted me, and I must say that it has been a more enjoyable experience going back.
There's lots of stuff to talk about there, because there's a division between consuming information because you just need to know something, where you've got nonfiction, or, if it's a self-help book, do we care about the dramatic tension of your self-help book? Probably not. I just want to know what the guy or gal has to say. So there's a difference in, like, what's the purpose of your consumption of this media? Is it for information, or is it for entertainment? Is it to feel a certain way, or is it just to gather some knowledge? And that also changes why you might choose to listen or consume at a different speed. I like to think that if you're consuming fiction, you want to be entertained, and you want to get the feelings that the author and the narrator wanted to deliver to you, for the same reason that if you watch a movie, you don't speed it up so you can get to the end. Okay, I watched Star Wars at point 8, and John Williams' his music sounds a little weird, and I didn't really know what happened in that scene, but I got to the end, and I know what the Death Star blew up. It's cool.
Yep. So everybody watching this, we've warned you: don't speed run Bloodline. Don't do it.
I'm a pretty brisk narrator. I'm fairly fast. A lot of when you see people talking about changing their speed, they're almost always speeding it up. They're very seldom slowing down books. And if it happens, it's like the 0.9 or something. It's just barely. And there's two components to pace. There's how fast you speak, and then there's how much time in between phrases you give people to catch their breath and remember what you said and digest it. And so both of those things work together, and whether you're comprehensible when you're speaking. And then there's just the technique that you use to deliver things. If you say things like, the bit on the end of like a commercial where they have to give you all the legalese in about 4 seconds, and they rattle it off and it's totally monotone, there's no way you can tell what they said, because there's no inflection to tell you what anything meant. So how consumable audio is a combination of the rate at which you speak, the amount of time you give hang time between phrases that allows you to digest what was said, and then the technique you use to say the words, how you inflect, how you draw out a phrase, the pitch of your voice as it changes. That gives you all these little cues that let you know what the words meant. So all of that together is how whether you can understand what's going on. I think that maybe gets complicated if you're listening like as a English as a second language or something. Like, if that wasn't your first language, I think you may need things potentially to be slower, because you have a little bit more rewiring going dynamically in your brain all the time to match the meaning to what you need.
Right.
But
still super interesting, and you converted me.
I change my pace all the time. Like I've been slowly evolving the pace at which I read things all the time, because I listen back. I'm like, oh, maybe that needed another quarter second. Maybe they needed another half second. I wish that I had a little more hang time between that phrase. And I think most narrators do this. We're constantly trying to dial it into the speed that we think is right.
Okay.
Right. So about characters, I know you have like several voices that you always go back to in pretty much every single one of your books, and then you've got some that are pretty unique to each book, like
Hmm.
based on the accents and stuff like that. How do you create a new character when you need to? And I guess like how do you decide when you need to create a new character voice anyway?
So a lot of the ones that I use a lot are just kind of like archetypal voices, like the young guy who has no accent and is supposed to be kind of like your relatable audience stand-in. As long as they're accentless, there's only so many places I can go while I'm younging myself and still trying to be kind of, natural, relatable person. Once you start going into other voices, I think all narrators work differently. For me, I have to have an image of a person in my mind. And I don't normally get that when I read a book, weirdly. A lot of people, like, they can see the characters very vividly. I can't unless I cast them to people I know. So I have to think of an actor that I think would play the role because I need to see what their face looks like in my head because that tells me how they would say something. And it's not like I want to do an impression of somebody, but I need somebody in my
It's
head
an
that I can
inspiration. Yeah.
visualize doing the thing because a lot of voices is your mouth posture, your oral posture. It's how your mouth sits.
Right.
So if you let your jaw hang low like Nixon, you start to get this kind of lower. There's all this to the set of your face, which you get from an actor if you've ever watched them act, informs that. So when I have new voices, I try to think, well, who's this character? And if I had to make a movie, who would I get to play this character? And then that's usually where I jump off from because I need that person in my head to stay consistent and to give me
Right.
like lots of little cues for how I'd act a scene out.
Right.
I'm
Must
I'm
be.
trying so hard not to ask who the cast is for Cradle.
I mean, Ethan was Tom Hiddleston. Dross, initially, I was thinking, went through a couple versions. Um, there was kind of the Wheatley from Portal version, which you played around with, but there was too much British bantery snark with Ethan, so it was it was confusing.
Mhm.
And then it was kind of like a Ryan Reynoldsy sort of vibe to it, and then basically took that and kind of tipped it over into Dross because he needed to be a little less natural and a little bit more different, and so he
Right.
became what he became. We kicked around with Yaren, and it was Gal Gadot. We were like, who would have like an exotic sounding accent that you can't place, but who would kick butt? And that's who
Mhm.
they came up with because we kicked it around for a while and we just weren't sure what the accent should be because she has all those funky idioms that you've never heard anywhere else.
Right.
And it says specifically that she has a strange accent, but it doesn't sound like she doesn't sound French. She doesn't sound,
Yeah,
it doesn't.
for sure.
What
What
if
does
she
she
did
sound
sound
like?
French?
What does
Oh
she
my
sound
gosh.
like? I don't know what she sounds like. Um, so that was how that came about. A lot of the others, I'll have an actor like, oh God, it was everybody from James Hong was I think the the library keeper in book one,
Yep.
and the not the library keeper, the relic keeper, the treasure room.
Elder Rom or
Elder
something.
I can't remember his
Elder
name. Elder
I think
Oh
Huang
my
it's
God, there's so
Rom.
many
or
names.
I'm pretty sure it's Rom.
Elder Rom, yeah, that sounds right. Elder Rom. I
Pretty
think he said
sure.
okay.
James Hong in my head, and like John Rhys Davies was one of the other elders. I mean, I had somebody in mind. Um, it's usually not hard to come up with somebody.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I
Naru
mean,
Juan was the dude who played the in Game of Thrones, the head of the Lannister family.
Jamie.
okay.
Okay. I don't
Not
remember
Jamie,
his.
Well,
the older
it's
guy.
it's it's
The older
the guy who
dude.
played
The
Tyrion, that actor, yeah. He's in a lot of stuff.
He's in a bunch of stuff. It's
Hmm.
just like that actor. That's who I had in my mind. Not as weather beaten, but
For sure.
Right. I noticed one voice I have never heard you use again was Elder Whitehall. That one didn't seem to have gotten recycled anywhere else.
oh my
It's
God,
like
Elder White.
young and old at the same time from book one.
It's
Oh
the
Uh,
yeah, because he
kid.
was weird. Yeah, he was
Mhm.
weird to do. He was weird to do.
Yeah.
I don't think I've used Narugwe anywhere else. He has a very specific kind of drawly, weird thing going on. Um, there's a lot of characters um, there's like these archetypal characters that come through. You know,
Mm-hmm.
You got the little old
Yeah.
lady, the little old snarky lady archetype that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Street Cultivation has Granny Whitney. Also
Oh,
very,
she
very
was the
similar.
worst.
Fisher Gesha
But
is one of my favorite characters.
yeah,
that
Fisher
you did.
Gesh is
Yeah.
there's that she's got that archetype. So I mean, and you take the archetypes and you bend them to the language, because the language that the author writes kind of informs how you deliver it a lot. You know,
Right.
how snappy or how drawn out or slow, or you get a lot of ideas about pace and how you would write it, but then you got the voice kind of under it.
And how nice of Will White to name the Akura family and their virtues. So it's super easy to give voice to them, right? So
Well, it gives you lots of opportunity for cool lines. Lots of
True.
opportunity for cool lines.
very true. That line with
Travis,
Travis at the end. Go ahead.
I'm gonna need to ping you offline, Travis, about the mercy line. Spoiler
From
alert.
the sample?
But the mercy line, yeah.
From the
Yeah.
sample?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a quick question for you. You've written RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
You like the pacing there, and you understand game mechanics. And now you've started to narrate lit RPG, which has very interesting stories and very interesting, I'll use the word, game mechanics. What are your thoughts on like the viability of some of the mechanics in these stories? Like, as a game developer, do you have thoughts on?
I mean,
some of
they
the
vary
ideas?
really wildly. They vary really wildly. One of the reasons I liked Shadeslinger so much was because it felt like it was designed. It felt like everything was fairly thoughtful about the design. It felt like this is not too far off. I mean, barring the fact that we could have like a physical experience in a game,
Mhm.
even that, it was like how pain was delivered and sleeping and stuff like that. There were these nods to like feasibility that were made, in addition to just the mechanics. The mechanics felt like they made sense as a designer. Sometimes they don't. And then sometimes they're really pushed far back, like David Petrie's Pixel Dust series. It's kind of more like Ready Player One. It's nothing like Ready Player One, but it's to that degree where the mechanics are really far down. It's more about the story and the people
Mhm.
and the opportunities it gives you to do all this crazy stuff while still being ostensibly modern.
Great book, by the way.
I love those books. There's some times where I'm like, yeah, no, but I try not to let it bother me, because usually it is all secondary to the story. It's just magic isn't real either. So I guess I can have game mechanics that don't make sense. I also can't kick fire. So it's magic.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I just like to live. I like to give Clayton a hard time because he's a huge lit RPG fan. And
Yeah.
anytime we do one of these, he recommends almost always a lit RPG book.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I've gotten the recommendation for Shadeslinger from both of you.
Several
So
I
times.
notice it when they are really good about the mechanics. And Shadeslinger, I notice, is like, yep, there we go. That's a really good example of how, if you care about crunchiness and mechanics, this is a really good example of how to do it.
Yeah, Shadeslinger was really, really well done.
While also just having a really good story that had characters that changed over time, with dialogue that was fun and interesting, and it wasn't crippled by preoccupation with mechanics. It was just a really good story too, that happened to also have somebody who did all their homework, and like it felt mechanically sound.
Right. I feel like there's actually a huge parallel between lit RPG and books that follow what I call like the Sanderson's theories, like how he writes books. Like you should, there was a class that he taught, and he said you should be able to guess as the reader what the character might do in a certain situation, and it should be feasible based on the mechanics of that world. So like it should make sense after the fact.
Yeah.
So I think that game mechanics also, as long as it makes sense in the setting that you've given it, it's definitely fine. But sometimes
it's
they go
rewarding
off the rails.
when something cool happens that it feels like it's solving a puzzle, almost like here's the situation, and following the rules that are available to you, this cool solution was arrived at. That's one of the cool things about AFK's Divine Apostasy series, is that every time there's like a battle or a conflict, It's like, what is the most creative way that we could use all of these crazy skills, some of them really mundane, to come up with some neat effect that allows us to overcome this obstacle? It's like a little, you get a little dopamine hit whenever
Oh
they come
yeah,
up with a clever solution to solve some problem. It's really fun.
Right.
I love that. That's what I want, and I don't get that very often whenever I'm attempting to read. lit
There's
RPG.
a sea of terrible lit RPG you have to get through to get to the good stuff sometimes.
Well,
But
that's why I'm just waiting, and I'm letting like refer a friend, help me. In this
I
stuff.
recommend one every week, and they're actually good. So they're I don't know how this is a progressive fantasy podcast, and I recommend a lit RPG every week.
Well,
But
I mean,
that's just how it happens.
it's progression fantasy adjacent, like we say. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just it's built into the plot that you have to level up, and it's like a game system.
Yeah.
But I mean, Cradle is sort of like that in some senses, in that there's tiers to power.
Well, yeah, I'm literally working on a video game in Cradle. Well, I hesitate to call it a video game. It's more like an interactive museum.
It's a valley simulator right now.
Yeah, it doesn't do much. If you're interested in that, link in the description, by the way. But we won't get into that today.
He has improved it. I don't know if you pushed that build out that has the buildings.
No, I haven't pushed it out yet.
You should, because I know there's people that are really interested and they'll want to play with like actual objects in the world.
I'm very critical of my own work, so I end up scrapping lots of stuff and then not pushing it out. So it's a learning process. So I'm a software engineer, but game programmer, I'm still learning. So
speaking of like things that are learning processes, there's a question I wanted to bring up. And Travis, you've alluded to this, like, I don't know, it's like a principle of yours without saying it's a principle, that you like to be able to solve the puzzle on your own, in a sense. Like, you're part of this big corporate game development engine, and then you went and you did your own little side hustle with your friend and you built awesome games that led to you acquiring skills in other areas so that you could kind of like comprehensively do it all. And so my question is, it's a little bit more abstract. It's not focused on narration, but continuous learning, like beyond education systems, in my opinion, is one of the most important things anyone can do. And it sounds like you've like reinvented yourself by doing it. Like,
I think being able to learn stuff and problem solve is like the most important thing you can do, and it's transferable skill. So I'm a college dropout. I only went to college for like a year and a half. I actually never worked for a big game company. Fate was my game. I coded every line of it. I designed it. So I was always on the like just figure it out and get it done track. So it's always been kind of my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And after running Runic for like 7 years, it was less. I got to do less of that. So I wanted to get back to it, because doing some of it and then trying to organize other people to get it done just never appealed to me for my personality type. So, but the same skills that you use to learn stuff to make a game are the ones that you use to figure out how to do stuff for narrating books. I mean, to a certain extent, you're deconstructing something that already exists, figuring out why it works, and then you're putting it back together yourself. And you're ideally understanding it to the level that you can then start to evolve that and make it the way that you would do it, instead of just replicating what someone else did. So if you're a game developer, a lot of the early stuff is taking in some little type-in program or thing that's got the source code, pulling it apart. You know, how many people got the Gorillas game that came with Quick Basic, where you could throw bananas from the gorillas on the buildings, and then they made their stupid version of that, or
Right.
the Snake game, or whatever, or Tetris. Everybody makes
The most
Tetris.
recent version is a Flappy Bird.
It's a Flappy Bird one. Everybody takes that apart. So you disassemble it, you put it back together, you figure out why it works. How does timing happen? How do I make things integrate position over time? All of these little things that you learn, and then you start to extrapolate and evolve. And those skills work for everything. So same thing here. You listen to how somebody reads a book. Wow, what are they doing with their voice? How are they pausing to do attributions? Is there a blend from dialogue into the attribution? Oh, there is. It's almost like they're the same thing, and it makes it flow together, and the attribution doesn't hang out there by itself. Oh, this is great. He said, sounds terrible. But if you blend them together, you can kind of throw it away and it sounds nice. So you make all these little observations, you pull it apart, And then you put it back together. And then you listen to what you did or play the game that you just made and you go, this sucks. And what did I do that sucked? And then you tinker with it and you fix it iteratively and you get better and better at doing it.
So what it sounds like he's saying, Remixt, is that done is better than perfect.
Oh, yeah. And then put it in a drawer, never to be seen by anyone else.
Yeah. You got to get feedback.
Man.
You got to get feedback.
My worst
Otherwise,
trait
you don't
is
have that loop.
my perfectionist, but also lazy. So
to a certain extent, even if you throw it away, as long as you're constantly making something new, because it's not like I didn't make tons of junky little not finished games. I did bunches for years and years and years, and nobody else on the planet will ever see them, but they were all building blocks. Eventually you pass some threshold where you're like, okay. Or somebody else pushes you over that threshold and you're out of time and something has to be shipped, one or the other.
Yeah, I have that same line of thinking where I like to do everything myself that you were talking about earlier. And the first mistake I made was trying to make a game from scratch with no engine. And that was the worst decision I've ever made. I did finish the game though.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's a good thing to do. That's
so
great.
bad.
Who cares? You run an engine. If you put an engine together, it's always a big deal.
Done
I never want to
better
make a game engine again. Never again.
Yeah, I know
Once you've done it.
Yeah, no. Getting a damn triangle on a screen was so hard.
Yeah,
it took so long.
The little blue, green, red triangle.
Yep. Making 100 million DirectX draw calls, just trying to draw a square.
And learning about batching. Yeah, that's good stuff.
No, it's not.
Wow.
It's
let's use Unreal or Unity, shall we?
Speaking of building something from scratch that you've never done before, Travis, do you have any ambitions to write your own books and then narrate them?
I like writing books. The most I've ever done is a novella. I'll never release them. I don't know that anybody would want to read them. I like writing. I enjoy it. And I like reading good writing. I don't think I will ever be an author. At this point, possibly due to the laziness of being able to narrate other people's good stuff. It's really nice to be able to just come in and put the whipped cream on after somebody else baked the cake. That sounds really lame. But after having to make stuff from scratch all the way to the end and push them out the door. I mean, it's a lot of work. Making games is a lot of work. It takes years. It's a ton of work. The amount of work that authors have to put into writing a finished work and getting it out there is really high compared to what I have to do. They have to spend months and months and months, and they have to go through dev edits, and they have to go through copy edits, and they have to do all this stuff. Maybe they got beta readers. I get some finished text, and I spend a couple days in the booth, and I get to prance out at the end of it and go, oh, that was great, which I really enjoy. And it's really hard to break away from now because it's so nice. I feel guilty about it, actually. It's so nice. Sometimes the books are not easy to read. Not every book is amazing. And the hardest ones are usually the ones that need the most help. But that's also part of the job. And still, it only lasts a couple of days, and then you're done. I get to ship all the time now. And every time I ship, it's pleasant. Games, you put a big pile of money on a table, you light it on fire. Several years later, you hope that the game releases and the money magically reappears and everyone hates you. That's basically the game shipping. But audiobook shipping is, I spend 4 to 5 days, the book comes out in a little while, people are probably pretty happy it came out, and I'm happy about it. It's amazing. So it's hard to want to be an author, apart from just the fact that I like writing.
Yeah, you get to be the last beta reader for everyone.
I think liking writing helps in reading work, because if you care about the craft of writing, it's not like I'm not some great author, because you're never going to probably read anything I ever write. But I do care about how words are put together, and I care about what the author is trying to do. And I, to at least some extent, I can see what they're trying to achieve beyond just the surface level, because I care about writing and I like it. Which I think is helpful when you're reading audio, because you're not guessing about what the author means as much, maybe.
Right.
You're like, I see what you're trying to pull off here. I'm going to make sure I'm there with you, making sure it happens.
Yeah. I mean, the seed of that question came from that nice, blog article that you wrote about why, like, I think it was I Implore You to Read
Yeah.
Cradle.
It's
That
it's
was
really
great.
it's a well written book, and it's nice to be able to appreciate how well written it is.
That's true.
Well, the article was well written too, and thoughtful in some areas, more so than like your average everyday like book review article type of thing.
Maybe that's what I mean. It's helpful to care enough about writing to be able to understand
Speak to
why
it, yeah.
something is good or bad, or why it's what its strengths and weaknesses are. It's I think is really useful as a narrator. And when you've got books that are just lots of strengths, that's really fabulous. And also, you just want everybody to read it. I mean, it's just like anything. If you read a good book, you want other people to read it. I don't know why we all want that, but we do desperately.
Something I found super interesting is I learned this week that you record live in Discord on your own Discord server, Cryptid Audio. It's
Mhm.
super interesting. How did you come up with that idea? Did you come up with that idea, or did you
I
steal
did
it from
not
somebody?
come up with it. It's totally stolen. Under Andy Parsnow, who does tons of game lit. You may have
Yeah,
listened to
yeah.
some of her stuff. She's been doing this for years now.
Oh, okay,
So she's got a Discord server. Yeah, which you should probably check out if you enjoy this, because
I
she's been
will.
doing it for ages. Sound Booth Theater does this. Steve Campbell does this. He does a lot of game lit. There's several narrators that do it. And as of next Tuesday, when Bloodline comes out, I will have been doing it for a year. And I, to a certain extent, it was probably COVID because lockdown happened and I knew I wasn't going to be going anywhere. And there's something really nice about having people around while you work. I like it. And it doesn't distract or bother me to have people there. And it's been really pleasant. So it also, I have found that it keeps me on task. If you
Yeah.
work from home, it's really easy to get up and go find a snack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having
Yeah.
other people to hold
Oh,
you
man.
accountable for what your
I
tasks
feel
are.
I feel
Powerful.
guilty if I go to snack, so I don't go get a snack now. I keep
Yeah.
regular hours when people can expect me to be there. I get my work done, and I'm a lot more productive, and I'm happier about it because I'm not like, oh, it's 8 at night. I really should got to get another 30 minutes in or something. No, I did all my work. I had a nice time doing it. People dropped in to say hi, and now I'm done, and it's really fabulous. So I like it a lot.
I wish people wanted to watch me code so I could do that too, because I end up working like 12 hours, like not actually the whole 12 hours coding, but over a span of 12 hours, I'll end
I
up
know
coding.
people do it. I know people do it. I
Oh,
know people Twitch their coding or Discord their coding, and they just sit there and code, chat while they do it. And so
yeah.
people drop in and watch.
Oh man,
And
but if
games at
somebody
least
comes in
have,
that's good at coding,
pretty
oh,
Technicolor triangles every once in a while. But so
true. Yeah. I do very boring cybersecurity work. I don't think people would want to. Also, I'm not sure I
Well,
could.
depends.
That's a whole nother can of worms. We don't have to get
if you're
into.
doing cybersecurity work, you probably don't want to discuss
So,
it.
yeah.
Let me just put up this extremely confidential code on my screen.
Yeah. I'm not
Or
sure
if you're
that
like
would work so well.
penetration testing something, and like
That
some
actually
people
could be
might think
helpful
that
if
is
somebody could help me out with the penetration testing. Hey, can you get into this? No, good.
okay. So there's a couple of fan questions from Will's Discord. Some of them were actually pretty good. The one that I want to pull in now has to do with burnout, because you just talked about how you get in every day. You seem like you have a good routine going, and it allows you to be more productive, which I'm assuming helps keep you from getting to that point of burnout. Especially, like, it's just on everyone's minds with Will going on like the 3-month break, so he can try to
Mhm.
avoid burnout and get back to loving writing.
Yeah.
Are there any genres that you read that you're getting that you worry that you could burn out for? Like, what do you do to avoid burnout beyond your routine?
Um, so to a certain extent, I'm limited on how much I can work because your voice only can work so many hours in a day. So I can only really record for, tops if I really maybe 7 hours a day. But I try to stick more to like 5.5, something like that. Because that's about all your voice can do. So there's kind of a hard limit on how much I can do in a given day. Now, it's really easy to overbook yourself and not give yourself any days off. And I'm very, very guilty of this. I had one day off in the past 2 months. I worked every day. But it's not as bad as games where you don't get any days off and you can literally work 24 hours a day because there's absolutely nothing to stop you except collapse. So it's not as bad as that kind of burnout. Also, I don't have to creatively pull this stuff up out of the mud. Most
Mhm.
of the work has been done for me, and I get to come in and, put a little shine on it. So a lot of it's not like it isn't work, because it is work, and you have to be engaged with what you're doing and making sure you understand what's happening and what the people are feeling right now and what's the tone the author wants to get across. Because if you lose track of it, then you get a flat read and people don't, it's just bad. But that's not anywhere near as hard as writing.
Right.
On the genre front, as far as burnout on a given genre, at the end of the day, they're all individual stories, and people just don't get tired of stories. So as long as you get enough good stories to keep you going, that's all you need. If I was reading nothing but bad stories, I'm sure I would burn out. I'd be like, these are all terrible stories. But by and large, most of the stuff I get is good. And even stuff that's like maybe not the best, usually part of the job is finding something to love in it and making sure that even if it's not my cup of tea, that I find here's what people are going to like about this and here's what they care about. And so you can make a book better for yourself because you have to be engaged in caring about the things that you want people who are listening to care about, right? This is what they're going to like. This is what they came here for. And so I'm going to make sure I shine this up the best I can. And to a certain extent, you do that for yourself. So it's pretty cool in that respect. One of the things I'd say is that if I could read every book this way, the ones that I want to read just for me, if I could literally read them out loud just to myself, doing all the voices and everything, that's actually like my ideal way to read a book. It's just not feasible for me to do. I can't do that. I don't have that kind of time because it
Right.
takes so much more time. But it's actually like, for me, the best version of the book because I didn't skim over anything. All the important emotional beats I had to hit, I had to feel them to some extent. So it's honestly kind of magic. It's kind of magic.
Quick side question. Do you ever listen to your own audiobooks? And
I listen to chunks of them because you have to kind of check up. So usually I'll listen to like the sample or something. This is how I keep track of things like if I'm drifting on like pacing and making sure I'm happy with it. So, and I'm constantly listening to the last, couple seconds when I screw up and roll back through. So I hear little bits of them, but I don't ever listen to like a whole book. One of the sad things about being an audiobook narrator, especially right now where I can't drive anywhere or fly anywhere, is I don't get to listen to a lot of audiobooks because I can't do it while I work.
Right. Oh God,
which
that
is
would be
sort of
so
a bummer.
Damn. That's like my whole route. Like that is how I stay productive because I work from home. That's how I do chores. That's how I exercise. That's how I do all the things that I don't like really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Audiobooks and podcasts. But podcasts and nonfiction, I do speed up.
Yeah.
There have been times where I heard about I heard a podcast on normal speed that I had listened to for years on 2x. I thought that the people like there's something wrong, like they're having like a stroke or something.
There's a lot of podcasts where they're kind of thinking about what to say, and you got that tennis match back and forth between two people talking to each other. That you get a lot more hang time. Okay, well. So you got all that kind of thing for long stretches. So I could totally see that. I used to get most of my audiobook listening in on commutes. So it was driving to work, was driving to go somewhere, and I lived in Seattle. It took forever to get anywhere, being on a plane. And now all of that is gone. So all of my listening time. And I have trouble doing like fragmentary listens. I can't listen for like just 20 minutes for this one task and then pick it up like 3 days later because I don't remember anything that happened. I need more contiguous listening time for it to like gel in my head. So I don't get to listen to a lot of audiobooks anymore. I listen to a lot of samples.
Interesting.
I listen to other people's samples. I listen to like, oh, this book looks cool. I'm going to listen to the audiobook sample. And I very rarely get to read anything that isn't on my schedule. So I'm reading I think I'm reading V.E. Schwab's The Darker Shade of Magic right now because it's pretty brief. And I had a big Sanderson run last year where I caught up on all the Stormlight stuff.
Nice.
But a lot of my reading is in here.
I had not even thought of that. That's because like you were.
It makes me kind of sad. I was like,
well,
poor Travis.
But think about this. Like he was painting a pretty rosy picture of like he gets to set his own schedule, do all this awesome stuff, and he gets to put the icing on the cake. And I was like, okay, so what's the catch? Well, that's the catch.
I only get to listen to me.
Yeah.
That's the catch. I only get to listen to me.
And you are the icing on the cake, so you don't get your own, I guess.
Which I really enjoy doing it. Like I said, I enjoy doing it. So it's not like it's some chore.
Sure.
I really do enjoy doing it. I mean,
Right.
it's work. Sometimes you got to drag your butt in and just get it done because you've got more to do. But it's really rewarding work. So I mean, I like it a lot. I can't complain.
We like that you like it a lot.
It's your night and day to making games.
What do your kids prefer?
Yeah.
Do they like you reading or making games?
My
more?
kids don't listen to me at all anymore.
Really?
No, I'm like, hey, you want to listen to my kids? My eldest read all of Cradle. Will not listen to it.
Wow.
My wife listens. My wife still
Okay.
listens.
Oh.
My
That was a
wife
question.
still listens to a lot of what I do. She's probably heard me more that way than in real life at this point.
Oh,
But-
no. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's cool, though, that you have someone in your family that will listen to your work.
Yeah, I was like, I guess most people's kids don't listen to them, even if it's their job to talk.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine when I was a teenager if I would have wanted to have to listen to my parent for like hours on end.
No, absolutely not.
Doesn't
Yeah,
matter
you're
how good
right.
of a storyteller you were. No.
And, I mean,
guess
they
I
got
can't blame
plenty
them.
of it as a kid. It's just
I know.
so they got you when you were on the come up, when you were still like
That's
polishing.
That's
Yeah.
right. JV. We got JV
Yeah.
Travis.
Well, they effectively got the worst of you.
They got
and
the worst of it.
And we thank them for that because
All that
without their
practice.
sacrifice, we
All
wouldn't
that
have
practice.
end polish now.
Yes, thank you, Travis's kids, for
They're the real
putting up
hero
with
of this story. Okay, let's see. Do you have any others? Because I mean, there's a couple things that I could bring up, but they're more like goofy type stuff.
it.
We can talk about anything.
Well, I really want you to say the word Arc Lord, even though
Oh, no.
it like goes against everything that you are.
I don't think my mouth can actually form it that way. I don't
Yeah.
think the human mouth was meant to speak it. that
There,
way.
well, there are many people that agree with you, and there are very few that don't. And
Well, it's just because of that consonant vowel rule. It's
it
because
is, and you're the
it's
only
just so-
person that has ever been able to express it that way to where I finally got it. Because I mean, I
Wait.
was arguing with people for months.
What about my McDonald's Golden Arches argument?
No.
Okay, you didn't like that one?
Well, because the arches has the E at the end, right? Arches.
Okay. I mean, I get
So
it,
you still
but
say
it's
ch.
still arch.
I don't know. Either way, it's the classic, like, don't make fun of someone who mispronounces a word because they first learned it while they were reading it type thing.
Yeah.
Arc Lord was not the first time I learned that word, but for whatever reason, the arc versus arch, arc sounds cooler to me. So that's what my brain did. And now it's stuck with me.
When you say Ark Lord, it reminds me of Noah instead of Cradle. So
It's the guy in Raiders of the Lost Ark behind it. When he opens it up, he is the Ark Lord, and then he
Yeah.
melts.
You did it.
Ex-
You did it. Oh, I heard it.
Just
Okay.
for you.
Well,
Just
I
for
can,
you.
I
Well, I
appreciate
could
that.
do it because I knew it was a K.
Yeah,
I knew it was a K.
that's fine. I'm happy to like give that ground. I just wanted to hear it once.
He's gonna post-process this into.
I mean, I
the
just
books.
completely changed my posture in my chair. I'm like, I'm invigorated now.
This is whenever you download all the audio for the books and you just replace them all with that hard K sound.
You know,
One by one for the director's cut. It's like the Harmy's version of Star Wars. It's just all of the arch is changed to arc.
Oh,
I
no.
thought about making that joke, but I don't ever want to be that guy. I'll settle for my little victories and move on.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever make fun of someone for actually mispronouncing something because the number of things that I did not know how to pronounce and was and now know how to pronounce is really high. The things
Yeah.
that I thought, oh, that's totally how that word works, and then I get the pickups back. And I'm like, what? No.
So, can you tell me the story about the QI word in 1,000 Li, like chi, or
So the mandate was to use Mandarin pronunciation and we use the pinyin chart, which basically you take all the little phonetic chunks and it will like say them audibly for you, so you can see what you want to do. And so I went through and I set out all the stuff that we were going to have to say to make sure that it was pronunciation approved. But chi, when it's normally spelled, is qi, chi. That's how you say chi. That's how you spell chi, is with qi for Mandarin. Chi is ch. It's like almost like saying the first part of church, but without the ch at the end. And so that's how it was spelled. And so that was the pronunciation that was assigned to it. So I did all these things. We did the tests. Here's the audio. Let's make sure you're cool with this. And then recorded it based on those. But everyone's expecting chi instead of ch. And so what ended up happening was I was like, okay, I'll go back and I replaced them all. I believe there were, in the first 2 books, like 560 instances, and I replaced them all. I did a big word search and figured out how to extrapolate the timestamps from that based on page and distance down page, and I found them all and I did them all. It took me about 2 days. And thenceforth, it is always chi.
Oh,
it is always chi.
That does remind me though. You created your own tool in Adobe Audition. I think it was Punch and Roll is what it was called, right?
Yep.
I'm not 100% sure what Punch and Roll means, but I will
tell you.
Awesome. I'm ready to hear that. But also, are there any other tools you've created that help your process? Or has programming, like your programming background, helped you at all in any other way when it comes to recording?
I mean, it definitely helped on that front. So Punch and Roll is a system that's, I want to say it was popularized by Pro Tools, where if you make a mistake, you move the playhead, wherever it's going to play from, back to a point before the mistake in dead air, and you press a specific keystroke or whatever, and it'll play what's called a pre-roll. It'll go back some preset number of seconds. You'll hear what was said prior, and then once that pre-roll ends, it will softly cross-blend to a recording. So you can have a nice clean blend to you picking up from what came before, and you can judge pacing because you heard the prior audio. And then when you're done, you bounce that down to a final contiguous waveform, and that is the final audio. And it's a nice clean way of not having any mistakes in the audio that anybody has to pull out.
Right. Okay.
Because previously what people would do is something like clicking. They would have like a dog clicker, or they would snap their fingers. They screw up, they would go, and it will make a big spike in the waveform. They'll say it again. If they mess up again, they click again until they eventually get the take right. And then what you have to do is shuffle through this giant waveform of a chapter, find all the big spikes in the waveform, and remove the bad takes, which is time consuming and annoying.
Yeah. It's awful.
So that's what Punch and Roll is. Adobe Audition did not have that functionality, but Adobe Audition does have something called spectral editing, which is basically a way of viewing all of the spectral information for your audio data. And it's this big kind of color-coded mess of stuff.
It looks like a thermal camera.
Sand.
I think I've seen it.
It looks kind of thermal, yeah. But the cool thing about it is that you can edit that in a way that you can't edit a wave, which means you can edit parts of the spectrum. So, for instance, if you have a sound and you have a little whistle, you'll see like a little yellow squiggly. You can learn to read the spectral view. So you can actually use what's called a heel brush, and you just wipe out the bits of audio you don't want.
That's actually
so you can
really cool.
literally repair parts of audio. You're not by replacing it, by actually changing the spectral data just in a very specific location.
It's like Photoshop for audio. That's awesome.
Exactly. So it's really cool and it's really powerful. But to do that, you would then have to record in another program and do your punch and roll, then take the audio in and then edit it. It was just cumbersome and time consuming. And I'm a serial optimizer and an engineer, so I didn't want to do that. So Audition, Adobe had a way to write plugins. So I wrote one, set it up, and that's what I use. And it's really fast. And it's the only way to have that kind of integrated workflow that exists in the world. There's no other way to do this without using multiple programs. And if you're an engineer, you know that switching between programs and moving your data between them is time consuming.
It's a pain in the ass.
And
yeah.
So basically, being an engineer who's had to, incorporate a lot of different software, it's easier to find solutions to that kind of stuff.
Right.
So my workflow is really fast. And since as an audiobook narrator, you're paid by the finished hour that you produce, the faster you are and the more efficient you are, the more money and the less time you spend doing annoying garbage. And I hate doing tedious, annoying garbage.
I think everyone hates doing annoying garbage.
And we'll do everything I can to automate it away.
Paid by the finished hour.
Yep.
That's good.
So if it takes you 10 hours to make one finished hour, your rate of pay sucks.
Wow. So you're almost like promoting yourself by having created that program. You gave yourself a little pay raise.
I did give myself a pay raise in terms of, not having to spend that time, because every hour you spend mucking around is an hour you're not narrating.
Nice.
Yeah. So, Travis, what have you thought about our podcast so far? Have you enjoyed the convo?
I have enjoyed the convo. I love doing stuff like this.
You're officially our first guest. First guest. You won't be the only one because I have a certain author coming in on Friday. But I mean,
I'll always be the best one.
You'll definitely be the best one in Clayton's heart for sure. I can already tell.
I mean, I'm obsessed with audiobooks, so he's not wrong. But
this has been a blast, and I really appreciate you jumping on and helping us out and telling us everything. It's been great.
I've had a great time.
Awesome. So, Clayton, you want to end scene this?
End scene.
You started us off really well.
Sure. So thanks for joining us today, guys. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Travis. We hope to have you back sometime in the near future to ramble on more about all this technology and random malarkey that we've gone through. But as we said before, you can find Travis's stuff in the description, and be sure to check out his Discord. Cryptid Audio, I think is what it is. If you want to listen to him record audiobooks live right now, he's recording AFK's fourth book in the Divine Apostasy, I think that's how you say it, series. And it's really good. I've been listening in, so you might be able to catch the end of that there. So until next time.
Have a good one.